Have you ever found yourself justifying abusive behavior by saying, "But he was just stressed. It was just a comment"? It happens in every relationship. Be careful. Emotional destruction doesn't start with yelling. It starts with swallowed silences, little words that hurt, looks that diminish, promises that never come to fruition. And worst of all, you get used to it. In this video, we'll navigate this dangerous territory of small abuses and show how something that seems normal can be corroding who you are. If you've ever kept quiet to avoid conflict, felt guilty for something you didn't even do, or constantly justify the unjustifiable, stay until the end. This video could be the turning point you've been needing. After watching it, you'll no longer ignore the signs you now take for granted. You don't wake up one day and find yourself in an abusive relationship. What happens is a silent accumulation of small emotional violations. It all starts with subtle, almost imperceptible details. A criticism disguised as sincerity. A joke that belittles you. A look that invalidates. You feel discomfort, but you ignore it. Because it's small. Because it doesn't seem serious. Because you want to believe it's just a misunderstanding. And so, to keep the peace, you shut up. You give in. You laugh half-heartedly. You swallow what you want to say. This is the first step. The point at which you begin to abandon yourself to keep someone close. The abuser often doesn't yell. They test. They gauge how far they can go. And when they see you don't react, they push it a little further. This is how the line between respect and abuse is blurred, little by little. Disguised as love, care, concern. You begin to believe that maybe you're overreacting, that you're too sensitive. And little by little, you begin to doubt yourself. That's the power of small abuse. It makes you feel wrong for feeling. And then you change. You walk on eggshells. You choose your words more carefully. You control your spontaneity, not because you want to, but because you're afraid of the reaction. And the cruelest thing is that sometimes this fear comes along with affection. After the tension comes the apology, the affectionate gesture. This confuses your brain. It leaves you trapped in a cycle of tension and relief, of pain and reward. This is exactly how abuse disguises itself as affection. And before you know it, you no longer know where love ends and emotional abuse begins. The first warning sign is never a punch. It's a question. Am I the problem? Emotional abuse isn't constant, and that's precisely what makes it so dangerous. It doesn't scream constantly. It whispers. It caresses after it hurts. First comes the tension, that awkward atmosphere, the heavy silence, the glances that avoid or stare coldly. You sense something is about to happen, but you don't know exactly what. Your body goes on high alert. Your heart races, your hands sweat, your breath shortens. You start to question yourself. What did I do wrong? Did I say something I shouldn't have? Self-blame sets in. You take responsibility that isn't yours. Then comes the explosion. Sometimes it's an aggressive comment. Other times, a jealous outburst, an emotional punishment, a sudden withdrawal. You feel helpless, trying to understand where it came from, trying to fix what you don't even know. You broke. And then, when you're at your most fragile, comes relief. The apology, the promise to change, the unexpected affection. That's when you let your guard down. You think maybe you overdid it, that it was just a difficult moment. This cycle grips you like a drug because it activates your emotional reward system. You suffer, but the relief that comes afterward gives you the false sense that there's still hope. You begin to associate love with pain, reward with effort, caution with control. And so the abuse continues. But now you no longer see it as such. You interpret it as a phase, a problem to be solved, something that will get better, but it doesn't. Because it's not an isolated mistake, it's an emotional pattern. And as long as you continue to cling to the relief, you won't be able to see the damage of the tension and the explosion. Not all abuse presents itself as obvious pain. Sometimes it comes disguised as concern, jealousy, because you love me. I only want the best for you. It begins by gradually controlling you, what you wear, who you talk to, where you go, but not with orders. With subtle questions, with comments that sow doubt. Are you going out in that outfit? Are you still talking to that friend who doesn't? Like me? Why go out if you have everything here with me? At first, it feels like caution. Then it starts to suffocate. But you're already emotionally invested, and you think giving up yourself is proof of love. Little by little, you lose yourself. Your desires are nullified. Your freedom becomes a minefield. You walk on tiptoe. You measure every word. You remain silent so as not to create a climate. And the cruelest part, when you try to assert yourself, he turns the tables. He calls you exaggerated, ungrateful, someone difficult to love. You begin to doubt your own perception, thinking you're seeing things where you're not. This is the effect of emotional manipulation. It breaks your inner trust. You feel wrong all the time, even when you're right. And then when you finally muster the strength to speak up, you hear, "I only do this because I love you." And this phrase, which should be a gesture of affection, becomes a weapon. A weapon that traps you in a place of constant invalidation. You come to believe that love requires sacrifice. That love is endurance, but it isn't. Love that demands your annihilation is not love. It is control. And control disguised as love is one of the most silent and dangerous forms of abuse. You find yourself saying, "It's just the way he is," or "At least he doesn't hit me." And so, you begin to relativize the pain, to justify the unjustifiable, to get used to what once made you cry in silence. Because the discomfort is no longer an exception and has become routine. You wake up with a heaviness. You go to sleep with a knot, but you can't identify where it comes from. It's as if you're trapped in an environment where the air seems heavy but invisible. A relationship where everything seems normal, but nothing is peaceful. You laugh reluctantly. You agree to avoid arguments. And every time you think about leaving, something holds you back. Guilt, fear, hope. You remember a good moment and try to convince yourself it still exists. But that good moment was a blip, and now it's just a straight line of pain. Your mind creates arguments. He's stressed. She had a difficult childhood. Maybe I'm expecting too much. But the body feels the truth before the mind accepts it. Your body gets sick. Your skin reacts. Your immunity drops. It's as if the body screams what the mouth can't say. Because prolonged discomfort doesn't settle. It infiltrates. And then, before you know it, you're defending what hurts you. As if it were the only love possible. But it's not. You just haven't learned yet to recognize what true love is. Because what's too constant becomes the truth. But just because you've gotten used to it doesn't mean it's normal. And just because it doesn't hurt all the time doesn't mean it's not slowly destroying you. When abuse comes disguised as care, he asks where you are all the time. He says it's out of concern. He says it's because he loves you. But deep down, you feel surveillance, not protection. He complains about the clothes you wear. He says it's out of jealousy. But jealousy isn't proof of love. It's a symptom of control. At first, it seems like zeal. I only want the best for you. I care about you. But little by little, you realize that your well-being is never a priority. You're always being corrected, limited, pruned. As if your way of being were a problem. As if you needed to be edited to be accepted. And it hurts. Because in the beginning, you thought it was beautiful, that someone wanted to take care of you. But today, you realize that this care comes at too high a price. The price of your freedom, of your identity, of your swallowed silence. And yet, you feel guilty for thinking about leaving. Because those who hurt also know how to offer affection when they want to hold you back. These moments of affection confuse because they make you doubt your own perception. Am I exaggerating? Am I the problem? But those who truly love you don't diminish you, don't make you walk on eggshells, don't erase who you are. Love doesn't require you to erase yourself to be kept. True love is a space where you grow, not a place where you have to hide. The constant doubt, am I exaggerating? You start to doubt your own feelings. Something hurts ... But you think, maybe I'm being too sensitive. Someone offends you. But you reply, he was just nervous. An action makes you cry silently. But you convince yourself, she didn't mean any harm. This constant doubt is a side effect of small abuses. They don't scream. They whisper. They don't leave marks on your body. But they do leave scars on your self-esteem. You question yourself so much that you live in fear of making a mistake, of displeasing, of seeming difficult. And so you adapt. You mold yourself. You silence yourself. You fit into a role that isn't yours, but seems to be the only way to keep the relationship going. And every time you try to talk about it, the other person minimizes it. You're making a mountain out of a molehill. You're overreacting. It was no big deal. Over time, you begin to doubt your own judgment. And when you doubt your own, pain ... the one who hurts you becomes even more powerful. Because now, besides suffering, you still feel wrong for feeling. And this is the perfect ground for the abuse to continue. Silent, subtle, but increasingly destructive. When you start to disappear from yourself to fit in with someone else, you don't realize it right away. But little by little, you disappear. First, your boundaries become more flexible. You tolerate what you would never accept before. Then your voice begins to lower ... You speak less, give fewer opinions, impose less. Little by little, your desires become silent requests. And your needs become nuisances that you try to hide. You stop looking at yourself with affection because you feel you no longer measure up to what the other person expects. And worst of all, you start to think the problem is you. You change the way you dress, the way you speak, the way you express yourself. You lose traces of your essence, trying to achieve emotional stability. But you don't realize that this stability costs a lot. It costs you. In the name of love, you start to avoid conflict. But in practice, you're avoiding yourself. You pretend everything is fine just to avoid causing distance. But this performance gets tiring. It gets tiring to smile when you're sad. It gets tiring to swallow words that burn inside. It gets tiring to try to be enough for someone who doesn't recognize even the most basic parts of you. And that's when fatigue becomes a symptom. You no longer know who you are without the presence or approval of the other. And when that happens, the small abuse has become a theft. He has stolen your identity. But the good news is that what was silenced can be rescued. And you can. Yes, start to come back to yourself. Addiction to emotional crumbs. Have you ever noticed how, in some relationships, what keeps you going is simply the expectation that it will get better someday? This is the cruelest addiction, waiting for emotional crumbs as if they were banquets. The other person shows up little, offers even less, and yet you stay. And why? Because sometimes a good morning that comes after a week of silence feels like a gesture of affection. Because a warm hug after hours of coldness still feels like a sign of love. You get used to celebrating the bare minimum. Calling care what, in fact, is relief from abandonment. And this creates a vicious cycle. The less you receive, the more grateful you feel for any attention. It's like an emotional system that has been programmed to believe it doesn't deserve more than that. You start to settle for less. And without realizing it, you start to shrink to fit in the little the other person offers. But no one was made to live on scraps. You weren't born to deserve only the other person's good days. And the love that demands you settle for the basics isn't love, it's survival. Emotional in disguise, but surviving is different from living. When you start begging for affection, something inside you already screams, "This is not what I deserve." But this scream is muffled by hope, by the expectation that one day the other will transform, and then you are left, always waiting for a miracle that never comes. But miracles do not happen where there is no reciprocity, and merit is not. An achievement, it is a basis. You need to stop accepting so little as if it were everything, because as long as you believe that this is love, your emotional hunger only increases. And no crumb will be enough to nourish someone who is born to feel whole. The beginning of destruction, when you start to doubt yourself. Emotional destruction rarely starts with screams or big explosions. It starts with a look that invalidates you, with a joke that hurts, but is said in jest, with a silence that cools, but you think it's normal. It's subtle. It's almost imperceptible. But little by little, you start to doubt yourself. Am I exaggerating? Am I too sensitive? And then, without realizing it, you start to shut down, to harbor discomfort, to stop complaining. Because every time you tried to take a stand, you were minimized, or called traumatic, or told that that's just how it is. You're the one who complicates things. So you mold yourself. You adjust, you adapt, and in that, you start to lose touch with your own intuition. You sense something is wrong, but you can no longer trust what you feel. This is the terrain where silent destruction sets in. It doesn't tear you away from yourself all at once. It undoes, drop by drop, your perception of reality, until you no longer know what you deserve, or what love is, or how far you can go without being accused of being difficult. And in that space, where doubt takes the place of trust, you become vulnerable to accepting the unacceptable, because your parameter of love has been contaminated. And when love is confused with pain, you begin to accept pain as an inevitable part of the bond. How micro-abuse disguised as care. What makes micro-abuse so dangerous is that it doesn't come with a bad look on its face. It comes with a smile on its face, with a concerned phrase, "Are you going to go out in that outfit? It's just that I care about you." And you believe it. Because at first, it seems like care. It seems like attention. It seems like someone who cares about every detail. But over time, this attention turns into control. This care turns into criticism, and you start to wonder where your freedom is gone. But since everything is said in such a sweet tone, you feel bad for feeling bad. He only wants the best for me. She only wants to protect me. And that's the poison of microabuse. It disguises itself as love. And when abuse hides in what seems like affection ... you don't react, you think it. The silent abuser rarely screams. They know that subtle manipulation is more effective. They confuse you, trap you, diminish you. But so slowly, you don't realize you're being erased. You just feel like you're getting better with time. Calmer, more understanding, less explosive, but really, you're becoming less you, and more what the other person wants you to be. You're disappearing and calling it love. The cycle of doubt. Am I the problem? Microabuse has a corrosive effect that goes beyond what's said. It alters your self-perception. You begin to doubt your feelings, your reactions, your intuition. Am I overreacting? Am I being too sensitive? And this constant doubt undermines your confidence. You stop reacting. You begin to swallow your discomfort to avoid creating conflict. Because every time you try to explain how you feel, you're invalidated. You're making a mountain out of a molehill. I was just kidding. And these phrases, repeated in a light-hearted tone, are sharp daggers that cut into your reality. Little by little, you begin to believe that you are unstable, which is dramatic. That maybe the problem really is within you. And this is the most dangerous point. When the other no longer needs to silence, you do it alone. You become an accomplice to your erasure. You start to police yourself, to walk on eggshells, to try to be better all the time. Not for growth, but for fear. Fear of displeasing, of being criticized, of being abandoned. And the cycle repeats itself, because every time you remain silent, the feeling of disconnection increases. And the more disconnected you are from yourself, the more vulnerable you are to the other's control. Abuse alienates you from yourself. And that's why breaking out of this cycle requires more than courage. It requires reconnecting with your truth, with your limits, with the voice you learn to silence. Normalizing pain. When the absurd becomes a routine, the danger of small abuses is that they don't seem like abuse. At least, not right away. They arrive disguised as jokes, as concerns for you. And that's how pain becomes everyday silent, almost invisible. You start to live in a state of alert, but you don't realize it. You're always tense, but you say it's fatigue. You feel a constant tightness in your chest, but you call it stress. And what's happening, in fact, is a slow emotional collapse. But since no one yelled, since there was no physical assault, you swallow it. You stay. You tolerate it. And your brain, to protect you, begins to adjust. That cruel comment becomes, "It's just the way he is." That emotional absence turns into, "He's just the way he is." You start to call love what is merely a relationship of control and devaluation. And that's the scariest part. Pain, when repeated, becomes familiar. And the familiar, when unquestioned, becomes acceptable. You normalize it, accept it, adapt. And so, what should be unacceptable becomes part of the routine of everyday life. You start to call chaos home. And when someone asks you if everything is okay, you answer, everything is fine. Because not even you know where the pain began anymore. It has diluted between the lines, in the details, in ordinary days, but the body remembers. The soul screams, sleep fades, the smile weakens, and the emptiness grows. Until the day you decide to question, since when did I convince myself that this was normal? Microviolence, that silence. The daily theft of your voice. Small abuses don't scream, they whisper. And that's precisely why they're so dangerous. They silence you little by little. You start to think twice before speaking, to measure your words, to predict reactions, to walk on eggshells. And without realizing it, you're no longer saying what you think or what you feel. You start to edit your truth to maintain the peace. The peace that, in truth, never existed. Just fear disguised as harmony. These micro-violences don't leave marks on the body, but they leave deep scars on the soul. A joke about your appearance, a comment that invalidates your feelings, a look of contempt when you try to open up. These are small gestures, but with devastating impacts. Little by little, you learn that your voice bothers, that your affection is exaggerated, that your pain is drama, and then you fall silent. But silence doesn't mean peace. It means abandonment, self-abandonment. You lose yourself to stay close to someone, but the price is high. Because every time you silence your pain to protect someone, you hurt yourself more. You're telling yourself, my feelings don't matter. And this repetition creates a belief. The belief that love requires silence. That to be accepted, you have to disappear a little. But that's not love. It's disguised submission. It's fear of losing someone while you're already losing yourself. And when you get used to this dynamics, it's difficult to realize how violent it is, because it's subtle but constant. And what is constant becomes belief, becomes identity. And you start to believe that you were made to live in silence. When silence becomes the norm, the body reveals what the mouth does not. Say silence begins as a choice, but over time, it becomes a prison. Have you ever noticed how your body screams what you try to hide? Anxiety, insomnia, palpitations, pains that come out of nowhere, tiredness that doesn't go away. The body feels what the soul pretends not to know. And it's the body that denounces the abuse that has become routine. You try to justify the other person's behavior. I was stressed. It's not always like this. I make mistakes too. But your body doesn't lie. It shrinks when that person approaches. It freezes when you hear their voice. It falls silent before you even think to speak. This internalized silence is learned. You learned not to disturb, to not be too sensitive, to accept criticism as if it were advice, to swallow your tears as if it were maturity. And now your body is carrying the weight of it all, the weight of not being heard, of not being seen, of being molded to fit in a place that has always been too tight. Muscle tension is the suppressed scream. Gastritis is the swallowed cry. Exhaustion is the silent resistance. And the more you pretend everything is okay, the more your body gets sicker, trying to show you that it isn't. You weren't born to live on alert, to shrink, to nullify yourself in name of a love that only knows how to demand. You were born to be whole, and no healthy relationship requires you to give up on yourself to keep the other. You can still leave, and you can start now. Doesn't matter how long you've been in this cycle. It doesn't matter how many times you've tried to get out and come back. It doesn't matter how many people say you're difficult, intense, or too dramatic. You can still get out. And you don't need a major life change to do it. You need a choice. A micro choice, in fact. The choice to listen to yourself. To not be silent when something inside you screams that this is not love. The choice to no longer justify the unjustifiable. To stop apologizing for feeling, for wanting reciprocity, for desiring peace. You can start now without needing to have all the answers. You can start saying no, even when you're trembling. You can start coming back to yourself, even when you're afraid of loneliness. You can start disbelieving what you've been told about what love is, and rebuilding little by little what love means to you. Because the love that destroys your self-esteem, that erases your essence, that demands silence in the face of violence, is not love, it's control. It's need disguised as affection. It's trauma disguised as romance. And you no longer have to accept this as if it were normal. You no longer have to repeat what you saw, what you heard, what you learned. You have the right to choose yourself, to rebuild your emotional history, to stop accepting pieces while offering everything. This is not just a chance to change. It is a rebirth. And it begins with a decision to never abandon yourself for anyone again. If this video spoke to you, if at any point you felt that I was describing what you live, then don't ignore this sign. You deserve to rebuild your emotional history with truth, respect, and self-love. Take advantage of the fact that you're here and subscribe to the channel now. There's much more content like this waiting for you. Leave a like, This helps YouTube deliver this video to those who also need to hear it. It could be someone who is silent, suffering right now. And turn on notifications so you don't miss any new content. And before you leave, watch the video that's appearing on your screen now. It's the next step on your journey. In it, I show you how to identify the most subtle signs of self-abandonment and how to regain your strength before it fades completely. True love never demands that you be silent. And healing begins the moment you choose, even if you are afraid, to no longer abandon yourself.